Holmes is the ultimate competitor, and doesn't surprise me to see him do that.
How did you land on the way you handled that rotation?
Well, the plan was that Sidney would play the base snaps, and Makuba would play the nickel snaps. And we thought going into the game we would be in base more than we were, but they chose to pretty much make it a 3 wide receiver game. So the reps got distorted that way.
How do you think that Drew handled that extra workload at safety?
He did okay. He had a couple major busts that hurt us and could have hurt us even more. So looking for him to improve this next week.
It's been a couple of years now where the Chiefs have kind of nickel and dime their way down the field. The number of big plays they produce lately over the last year or so, 2 years, isn't what it once was under Mahomes. How does that factor into preparation? Even though you have a quarterback who's that dynamic and is.
I think they will continue to throw it deep some. I think they've made it a major emphasis this year. And they did it in their first game. They did it in the preseason. So I expect to see more of that.
Jacorian played a handful of snaps when Adoree was getting checked for the concussion. Did you see enough from him to draw any conclusions?
Not really. I'm not sure the exact number of it. 7, I knew you would know. Yeah, that's not enough.
I imagine Byron played a little bit more than he expected because of Jalen. How did he hold up?
He did good. He gave us some energy, ran to the ball hard, almost had that pick on the deflection, was involved with the caused fumble. I don't know who they ended up giving that to, Campbell, but if it was a sack, I think they would have halved it. So he did fine, and hopefully that's something for him to build on.
The volume of flags that you drew, was that the byproduct of the emphasis from officials, or do you think you guys need to clean yourselves up?
We need to clean ourselves up.
When Ja'Kai Campbell and Saquon, both of them made some pretty big plays in coverage, it seemed like. What did you learn about that on and on-field in the regular season? What can having 2 guys like that unlock in terms of what you can do defensively?
Yeah, they both did a good job. They each had one. Coincidentally, they both had one in practice during the week last week and didn't cover it as well as they did in the game, which is why practice is important.
We'll do a couple more. You've been around Jalen Carter for over a year now. Behind the scenes, how have you seen him maybe step into a leadership role, or just how have you seen him maybe mature over the past year since you've been around?
Well, to be considered a leader, actions speak louder than words, and he's got to lead through his actions.
Do you speak to him, or do you leave that to Nick and Howie?
Pretty much Nick on that, when it gets to that extreme. Pretty much that.
How do you feel about it right now?
We'll see. Like we said earlier, don't really know what Zadarius brings or doesn't bring. Uche got in there a few snaps the other night and did some good stuff. So we're feeling better about it.
That's one size. 6'4", 270. Is that something that you like, where you can shift inside and work there too?
It is possible.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Morning, everyone.
Coach, how important was it for Jake to hit a long field goal in game one?
Yeah, I don't know the importance for Jake in himself, but the importance for our team to push that to a 4-point game. Obviously, it always starts with the operation, then to the protection. And Jake has been having a really good camp, good preseason. Obviously, in that Jets game, having 2 50-plus yard field goals, and to go out there to put us up at a 4-point game, was awesome to see. And I know who Jake Elliott is. Hopefully, everybody else knows who Jake Elliott is. He's a hell of a kicker, and it's great for him to see that go through uprights pretty straight. And Braden pretty much called it pretty early that ball went in. So obviously, awesome to see.
Yeah, what's your evaluation of Bigsby as a returner, and what type of upside do you think he brings in that area?
Yeah, always. As I watch film across the league the last couple of years, he's popped up a lot in Jacksonville in terms of those big 40-yard chunk runs. Obviously, being a running back, he has that natural vision and feel when it comes to returning the ball. So obviously, very excited for anybody that we get on our roster to work with them. But again, it's more just getting him into a place. There's a lot that happens for a guy that gets traded, outside of this building. But to get him into a calm place, get him caught up with everything we want to do here, and see his talents excel on Sunday.
Is there in that position as a kick returner now with the league change?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of saw what the league was doing. I think the uptick in returns. You even see last night's game, the returns can help you in the field position wise, whether that's being smart and taking a touchback or having an opportunity to have a big return. If Chicago had 4 more seconds left at the end of the half, they possibly go out there for a big field goal because they had a big return off of Luther Burden. So the returner position, I think, has increased value with these new rules in place.
The game, Nick seemed to definitely praised your units for covering Kavontae Turpin and keeping him in check. What was the key to preventing Turpin from breaking one?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the collective coverage of the team. Everything, we could come up with the best game plan as all, but I think a lot of the times it comes down to your fundamentals that you work in, from OTAs to training camp to the first game. It's just a lot of it lane integrity, knowing where our leverage is, and population of the ball. Those coverages turn into defense. Obviously, when you get a lot of population of the ball, it doesn't give him a lot of leaks for him to get out there. But all of it has to do with those players going out there. It's all hands on deck. Shoot, you saw John Mechie out there make a huge tackle against Tolbert. So it's kudos to all these guys coming in tomorrow for the game plan, believing in it, trusting in it, and just playing fast, really.
Placement of Braden Mann and Jake from the kicking perspective of it.
Yeah. Those two, they work so hard to perfect their craft on the opposite fields when offense and defense are going. And, they know the dangers that are presented by all these returners in the NFL. But for them to go out there in those situations is awesome. And it brings not only confidence in themselves, but confidence in the coverage units that they know this ball is going over there. We have an opportunity to cut off 3/4 of the field and make a big play. And obviously, Braden with those 2 big-time punts at the end of the game, pinning them out of bounds and giving our defense a long field is awesome. And that's what we want to do in special teams, is just, field position for the offense, then vice versa for the defense, make sure they have a long field to protect.
On Braden, we saw him all throughout camp, just crushing the ball. Has he gotten better? Has his leg gotten stronger? Is there anything he's better at than last year?
I think Braden is probably one of the more hardworking guys I've ever been around. He's probably the more perfectionist that I've ever been around as well. He's going out there, and if he doesn't feel right, he will spend another 40 minutes out there with Tyler, working on his craft and just understanding what's the game plan for us. How is he going to accomplish that? And he goes out there and he does a great job for us. I can't say enough good things about Braden Mann as a player and as a person.
Why'd you like Jahan Dotson to return punts?
Yeah, Jahan, people forget his Penn State tape. He's calm, cool, collected. Like, you don't see Jahan have ebbs and flows. He's very 75-degree weather guy going out there. He's calm, knows makes right decisions. So we're just going to keep building off that. He didn't have a lot of opportunities, but I think a big thing is in that plus 50 punt, he was able to run up. You see a lot of times guys let that ball kind of bounce, and you're at the mercy of the bounce. Threw up the fair catch, knew he had time right there to get that ball at the 13, so he is a heady player as well.
Negative standpoint, Ben goes down on the opening kickoff. How difficult, when you have a core guy like that out so early, how difficult is that?
You feel for Ben more than anything else. The first play, he worked so hard to come back from a season-ending injury last year, and he's revved up. He's probably to go, then he goes down. Like, it's more, you feel so bad for the kid because he worked so hard. But in that other time, that other split second, Joe P and Tyler do a great job and just communicate with me who we're going to place, who we're going to put here, and that's the beauty of special teams. You go through all the reps with the ones and twos just in case something bad happens. So, the ability for these guys to come in here and understand that they can be up at any point is great, and you don't really miss a beat, which is outstanding. You saw guys go out there, whether that's Grant Gacatera going out there, Darius Cooper going out there playing a little punt return. So it's kudos to these guys always being ready, but you feel so bad for Ben. He's also, a heartbeat for our special teams. He brings some athleticism and some physicality, so it's up to us and the rest of the group to bring that same nature.
Each time on the kickoffs, was that intentional, and what did you think of the coverage?
The coverage was really good. I think the first one he got out to was the 32-yard line, whether it's the first one or the third one. But I think Jake did a really good job of making him go back and forth, not have a beat. Because when you go sideways, it gives our coverage unit a little bit more time to get down there. I thought Josh Uche did a really good job on his tackle of being physical and some speed. Then you see Smile, Trot, and Sydney kind of man the middle right there. So I thought the coverage was really good. But again, it takes all 11 of us out there on kickoff coverage to help out. Then, you get a couple penalties here and there, and now they have to start at the 12-yard line and help out the defense.
What's words about you post-game mean to you?
I pretty much owe darn near the whole world to Nick. Obviously, being able to hire me as a first-time coordinator. But, it just, he talks about it a lot, but you want to coach as hard as you possibly can for guys that trust in you, that believe in you. So, the words that Nick said, obviously they hold, a lot of weight to myself. But for me personally, it's all the players out there. They're the ones playing for 60 minutes in between the lines. I'm just trying to help them out as much as I possibly can throughout the week. So the players being out there to buy into the game plan and execute the game plan, it's more kudos to all those guys than anything else.
With kickoffs and week one, was it what you expected or any different?
Yeah, no, it's kind of what I expected a little bit. I'm sure there was a little bit more touchbacks than people probably thought, but I don't think that was by the nature of people trying to hit touchbacks. I think it's just, some kickers have extra juice and the ball takes off and some smart return play. But that's what I expected from throughout the league is, a lot more returns. A couple broke out, some big returns. I know there was a 71-yard return in the Tennessee-Denver game. Then there were some good coverages, with some added penalties that made some guys back up. So I think that's just going to be how it's going throughout the entirety of the year is a field position battle on that kickoff return.
If I can follow up on Bigsby, he only had 6 returns last year. It wasn't a big part of what he did in college either. Why hasn't he been featured in this role in the past?
Yeah. I don't know what happens in the other buildings, whether that be at Auburn or Jacksonville, but he shows the ability to do it. Hard-nosed runner. Obviously, I think he had, 800-plus yards as a running back. So it's just one of those things where you have a guy that's talented and you put the ball in his hands, and now you give him a little bit more space to see some vision. You're ready to see him go. Kind of very similar to Will Shipley last year. A couple opportunities, but he had a good high average in the return game.
On the league-wide kickoff. Like last night, 2 minutes to go, the Vikings returned the ball like it was 7 or 8 yards deep in the end zone to kind of, make sure the Bears couldn't use their, 2-minute warning advantageously. I mean, does that kind of, the new rules kind of add some strategy to, end the game and returning kicks that otherwise you obviously wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to situation stuff, and, Nick has done a heck of a job being situational aware. John Ferrari does a great job in terms of us communicating all that, but it goes back into the communication from up top. Everyone being on the same page of, obviously it dictates on who's your kicker, what's the weather like, how's your defense playing? There's a whole thing situationally that you could go on and on about. But again, for what, Chicago and Minnesota did, I'm not in those buildings. I can't speak on it. But for us, we would have a game plan going into what we wanted to do in that situation.
You face the team as much as you have over the Chiefs, as much as you guys have over the last several years, and you face one of the better special teams guys. How do you approach that heading into this week?
I approach it like every other week. You go into it respecting everybody. You respect all the players out there, and Tobe has been in the league for so long and has been really good for so long. But again, you respect everyone, but you don't, we're going out there to put our team in the best position possible from a special team standpoint. It starts with the game plan between myself, Tyler, and Joe P today, then implementing it tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday to the players, and having the confidence that we're all on the same page, and you always want to put the best product out there. So I'm not worried about our guys doing that because they have a lot of pride in helping this team, special teams wise.
Chiefs are going to be coming out with a certain kind of energy, given the last time that you played them. How do you get your guys to match that?
If you can't, if you can't have energy playing in the NFL, you're not going to be very successful. I'm not worried about the energy from the guys in here. They're all grown men. They're all adults in terms of that, and it's more of just being able to breathe out there and not get overly hyped and get out your own body. It's more just sinking to your level of fundamentals and going out there and executing.
This one's been on your radar for a while. At what point, between your conversations you and Howie, did you realize you might be a possibility here?
In terms of all that, Howie does a great job. Obviously, he's done a great job for a long time here. So, when he's able to pop by and say things of that nature, whether it be Bigsby or, other players in that nature, you just try to put them in their best possible positions that you see them to excel in. And that's my job as a coach. So when he does say that, it's now my job to put him in a advantageous situation as a returner.
Thanks.
We got Miami this week, though, so Clint Hurt and I are, having a good time with that right now. All right, ready?
With getting the ball, you have one completion, one completed pass, 10 yards. With that, do you want Jalen to force more things down the field, or is it all about just letting the game come to him? How do you kind of balance all that?
Yeah, I think really when you game plan and stuff like that, it's all about just kind of seeing what's happening and letting him play and be efficient. Each game is different, going into it. You think you're going to get one thing, you may get another. So in game, you got to make those adjustments and kind of just let it play out. So you don't ever want to stress anything like that too much because then you can create bad habits, obviously. And we were pretty efficient for the most part, and he did a good job. So, you really just want to look at how do we stay on track and advance the ball and do what we need to. So as long as that continues, that's kind of the goal. But obviously, if you do get an opportunity, we'd love to take that.
Ran too much into heavy boxes.
It's funny, not really. When you look at it situationally, we went back and did some self-scouting stuff. It wasn't that we ran into heavy boxes. I think there was just at times, situationally, there was a run called. And when you look at the coverage that we were given, they were kind of messing around with some stuff that appeared to be a little bit of a heavy box. And we didn't always block it properly, so we just got to continue to work on that. But really, when you look at just kind of the calls with how the flow of the game was going, for the most part, obviously in the first couple drives, we had a good flow as far as the run, pass mix, and kind of continued with that. So I wouldn't say, we definitely knew exactly every play what was going to happen. So it was a good mix for the most part.
Targets for AJ.
Obviously, the number one guy is going to be AJ, Devontae, Dallas. Those guys are going to get in the pass game. They're going to get the targets. And so going in, we had a fair share of things that were going to go him as the primary. And sometimes games play out like that, and that's kind of how it was. And kind of to the previous question, we don't ever want to force it. So if it's one of those games where you're trying not to force it and you're being productive and you're staying on track, the guys understand. He played his butt off too. Like he knew kind of what was going on and just the way it was. And then we were moving the ball and being efficient. So I think when you look at it, you always put that in mind when you start the game plan, like this week. Hey, he's the guy. This is where we want to go with it. And once the game starts to unfold, you just kind of play it accordingly.
I know you weren't the OC last year. We're wearing the hat, like the South Florida hat. But in the Super Bowl, this team did a good job shutting Saquon down. Did you learn anything from that? Do you watch that, study that at all? I know it's a different team. But.
Yeah, it's been a big part of this week and just kind of preparing for them again. Spags does such a great job just overall throughout the years of taking away, kind of what you do best. So we've had to be creative, and I think we're on a right track right now to be creative with the game plan to kind of get that going.
You mentioned the efficiency part of it. What's the balancing act of when you talk about AJ, sort of manufacturing a touch versus, all right, we're being efficient, so maybe we don't need to do that?
When you're balancing it, it's really like, what's the opportunity, or is it a first down thing or a second down thing? Is there a down that presents itself where we can get that done? So, if we're behind the chains, then all of a sudden you're going to want the full field reads potentially. If you're staying in phase and you get a nice first down run and you're manageable on second down, maybe you can afford to take that opportunity to say, hey, we're going all in on this thing. So I think it's finding that down if you get one to kind of take an opportunity to get, manufacture something like that if you can.
First game like for you overall? What was biggest takeaway?
Really, the whole staff, I thought the communication from all the coaches on the sideline, the box was great. The communication with the players and all of us was really, really good. Jalen was good in the sideline. The O-line was good. Saquon, all the guys were really good. The receivers were into it. They understood kind of what they were seeing and what they were feeling coverage-wise. So the biggest takeaway, I think, was the communication was good, which is what we're going to need going forward, just the in-game adjustments, being able to kind of get through all that. So overall, I think it was the right step in the right direction. And obviously, there's always things that you want to continue to look at, like, hey, how do we get better? And I think we did a good job of just talking about that as a staff and with the players on a Monday after we watched the film.
Talked about being at times a little more proactive was his takeaway. What is that? How do you interpret that?
I think he's just more comfortable. When you look at it, just another year kind of going against defenses and seeing things and understanding what he's seeing and just being able to communicate it with guys. And like I said, I've been around him for a while. We've talked about that before. So I think that just kind of felt more natural to him, and he did a good job. He's a dynamic player, right? And he's going to add depth to our roster. And I think he can make some plays for us offensively, and we can use him in different ways.
Yeah, Ben Zimmerman packages, are they out now, or can Granson fill that role?
He can fill that role, and Cam Latu can fill that role as well. So we have guys that can definitely fill that role, and I think it's something we can continue to do.
And set percentage-wise, used it more than in any game last year. Did you expect that going in to the Cowboys game, and what do you like about what that package offers?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I expected it. It just kind of unfolded itself. We had the one explosive to Saquon, on the perimeter, and it just kind of was something that appeared kind of throughout the game. And then late in the game, we used it in a few sets too, just kind of in that 4-minute mode. So it really wasn't something like in the middle of the game that we were doing. It just kind of happened naturally.
Both had to play 11 snaps, I think, first. How, is there any concern over Landon's back? And secondly, how have you been here 5 years? How have you seen Toth kind of develop to be that first guy up at that?
Yeah, he does a great job of just being available and ready for anything, right? Whether it's center, whether it's guard, if we ever need him to tackle, he can do it all. And so that's the biggest thing, right? So a guy that can step in there mentally and know what to do, you feel comfortable with. And so, I know Landon's going to be ready if he's ready, and we'll see where that's at. But, Brett does a good job of just feeling like, hey, coach, whatever you need, I got you. I can play all these positions. And that's very important in game when you have to sometimes juggle guys with injuries.
Back to Saquon, you mentioned, obviously how you guys might need to get creative with that going into Kansas City, but it's like 2 games in a row now where he's been held to 3 yards per carry. Going back to the Super Bowl, like how much do you go over stuff with Saquon? How much do you guys kind of collaborate on that as far as finding ways to be creative and get him in space more and all that?
Yeah, I think just as far as him and I, our communication, each week him and I talk a lot about, hey, here's the plan, here's what we're looking to do, here's some new wrinkles, and just see what he sees too, right? Because he watches a lot of film, and I think that's been really good. Even last week, even during in-game, he was really good to talk to on the sideline. Here's what I'm feeling and seeing. And even in the past, him and I have had a pretty good dialogue, in games with finding key runs when we need them. In the playoffs, that appeared itself a few times where him and I had some good dialogue with and the O-line. And so when you're putting in stuff early in the week, it's easy to talk through that. And as the week goes, they get a feel for kind of what you're looking at. And as far as when you put plans together, like Jason Michael and Stout and Eric Dickerson and Greg and all those guys do a really good job of working through all the runs with myself and really figuring out, hey, here's what could be an issue, here's what we need to figure out, this is good versus this, and vice versa. And then so when you're able to explain it to the players, they get a better feel for the plan and what's going to happen, and then the adjustments off of it in game.
What do you think about the blitz pickup from the running back position?
I think that the first game, some of that appeared to be like, hey, this is the first time we've seen this. We need to just work through it. And I think that's kind of been, if you look around the league, I watched a lot of football, obviously, this weekend. I think that was a constant. If you look around the league, just people diagnosing different things on defense, right? Because it's the first time you've gone against a defense and the speed and what you see things and pick it up. So obviously we did some good, and there's some things we want to correct. But overall, I think it's just going to be a work in progress. That's one of the things when you don't, when you're going against your defense in camp like we did for so long, you see something new for the first time, it gives you a little bit of oh, that's what that looks like and feels like again. You got to get back in the swing of it a little bit.
How tough is it to get back in a rhythm after an hour delay like you had?
Yeah, that was interesting. It was longer. We were joking a little bit after the game. It was longer than the Super Bowl halftime, and there was no structure to it because it was well, how long is this? How long do we have? So it was a little bit different. And we had so much momentum at that point too. That's where that was a little bit frustrating. We just got the turnover. We were ready to go. The first 3 drives went up and down the field. Then we got the next field goal and the next drive. So we felt like we were in a good rhythm. And then you sit for a while and wait and wait. So that's where it was a little challenging. They kind of just sit and wait and kind of get back in the flow of things. And then, it just it felt funny after that. I think the Cowboys experienced the same thing a little bit offensively where the defensive guys just came out and played.
How do you view the Jalen scrambles when you look back at them? Because they're obviously successful plays, but it doesn't happen within the structure of what you planned.
Well, sometimes, right, a scramble happens for a couple reasons, right? Sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's a read's taken away, or sometimes, as a quarterback, and every quarterback is different, but if he feels a void in there and he can go get it, go get it. First downs are first down. So you really don't have to worry too much about it, and he's really good about knowing when to scramble. And sometimes, it's just the route didn't match up or something happened and it broke down. He just has a sense of hey, this is my chance to get out. It's a 4-man rush. I'm out and I get a first down. So I think really each one you look at independently, was it a mistake we made on offense? Was it a scheme thing? Was it a route breakdown? Did somebody have a missed assignment? What caused it? And sometimes guys are open, but you take off and you get a first down. It's all good. First downs are first downs.
So good at avoiding splatter hits.
It's funny is he does a good job of just feeling and knowing where defenders are. If you watch him in space, he's really, really unique and able to make the first guy miss and kind of get his body in a position to know where the next guy is. And that's unique. I've been around some other guys, they get hit hard when they're running, and he does a really, really good job of just kind of being in space and making the first guy miss and knowing what's around him. I mean, he's got a very different feel, almost a running back-ish, feel. And there's been some skill guys I've been around too that have a really good feel for not getting hit too. And so, he's one of those guys that definitely has that gift.
First drive before.
Where does that awareness come from?
I think some guys just have a sense of where people are at all times, right? So if I'm running at you and I know somebody's coming from the side, I make the first guy miss, he's coming from the side, and then I know I'm going to get hit this way. So I think some guys, just like vision on a basketball court, it's a similar thing. You just have a feel for where defenders are and they were at. I mean, you look at Saquon, for example, in space. I mean, some of the moves he made the other night were dynamic, right? Some guys just have that natural ability.
Each of the last few years about using the early part of the season to find the offensive identity. How much have the last couple of days, you mentioned the self-scouting process, helped in kind of figuring out what the offense can lean on?
Well, I think, it's just game one, so we just kind of have to wait it out a little bit. But I think overall, just getting back in the swing of things and getting the feel for game planning and watching tape and an opponent and what they do and being familiar with it and in-game adjustments, that's the biggest thing I think that you have to be conscious of it as a player, kind of feeling the season out and feeling what the identity of the offense is. And then from there, I think you just feel comfortable with suggestions and answers and, oh, okay, they're doing this, we're going to get to this. So I think it does take some time a little bit.
And if so, you said last week the scripts have different purposes. What was the objective?
The first drive was not scripted. It was a little more of a kind of like what was happening and what we were getting and kind of challenging them a little bit versus what we were seeing. And so really every drive is a little bit different. Sometimes we're trying to see what they're doing. Sometimes you get a feel for what they're doing rather quickly. And I think it was a little bit of a balance of both. And we were able to kind of see what was going on and kind of plan the next couple of things from there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.